Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me, for those that are, of course. So this is the first time I've done a live feed just on my own for quite some time. Normally I do them with Avery on a Thursday, but I'm thinking more about just engaging more with you about what I do and why I do it, and be able to provide an opportunity to so someone just said, perfect timing, just walked in the door. Thanks for that. So the way I'm gonna do this is, well, first I need to say I feel very nervous about doing this today because normally I don't do this. I do it with somebody else. I'm doing this entirely on my own. So it's a bit of a challenge in a number of areas. So I'm getting some comments, so I really appreciate that, guys. I'll reflect back on your comments, because what I plan to do is run through a few issues that have hit the media today, and to have a conversation with you about that. So I've got something about Gaza, something about the Liberal Party in Queensland and the issues that they have around now incarcerating young people. I want to talk a little bit about Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the fallout in relation to that, Trump's tariffs and the impact on us and Albanese's response to Israel, as well as finally in this session to have a conversation with you about the comments that you make that I find really quite fascinating and interesting, and want to reflect on them and play back to you, I guess, some of the most interesting things that people do say to us in the comments section, which is really about me expressing my appreciation for the comments that you make. And the fact that I do look at them, I don't respond to all of them, there's just too many to respond to. But I certainly do appreciate it, because in the past, so I just want to give you a bit of a history around why I've been doing this. So I retired nearly 2 years ago. Was wondering what to do. I'd been on YouTube for a bit because I had the Child Protection Party and I was doing stacks of videos in relation to that. And I had my own site, the Tony Tompkins Show, but hadn't really invested all that much time in it, I guess. And so when I retired, I needed something that occupied my time, because I became fearful that in retirement I'd either spend most of my time playing golf or I would become a vegetable and find myself watching a lot of TV shows, becoming bored with myself and feeling like life wasn't kind of productive enough for me, because my life in the last 35 years in particular as a social worker has been exciting, with lots of variation and certainly a lot of challenges. And I didn't want those challenges to go away. I mean, I am 74. I do have a whole host of experience around a myriad of areas, and particularly issues around social issues in particular, working with people who are the most devalued, vulnerable people in our community, and understanding their perspective of the world and life. And as a result of all of that, I started a political party and I did lots of other stuff. So when I retired, I thought this was an opportunity to have conversations, to allow the brain matter to, instead of becoming fudgy and becoming soft and deteriorating, I thought it'd be an opportunity to speak to people about the issues that concern me, particularly the political issues, which have been really a part of my life for all of my life, because my father was involved in politics himself. So that's the background as to why I do what I do. And the live feeds I want to do at least once a week, on a Wednesday around this time, and also I'll try and do one with, I've had some technical issues doing them with Avery on a Thursday, but I want to get back to that as well. But primarily I want to hear from you. I want to be able to have conversations with you about the things that matter to you. Now, a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to create some videos actually, which were about interviewing people about their lives. Now, they're not necessarily people that were significant in terms of having a profile, but just wanted to talk to people, because I find generally from the work that I've done in the past, people are fascinating. People have all sorts of experiences that are worth talking about. Everybody has a history. Some are more significant than others, but nevertheless a history. And I wanted to be able to have conversations with those people. And so I guess the opportunity that YouTube has provided is to have conversations with you. So what I'd like to do is to invite you to contact me and to have a live conversation with you, or a recorded conversation at least. The advantage of doing a recorded conversation is I can edit it, and of course with these live conversations it's not possible. And of course also with most of the videos that I do, they are edited to some extent, and I can mess around with audio. I can change things so that they actually sound better and look better, and I record in 4K and so forth. But whereas with this live feed, it's not possible. I just hope that the audio and everything else is okay. So have a conversation with me. Talk to me. So a few people are on at the moment, and I appreciate that. It isn't necessarily about agreeing with everything that I say. It's actually about challenging some of the things that I say. I'm the first to agree that many of my comments are controversial, and that there are many people who think differently to what I do. And if that's the case, let me know, because I want to have conversations with you about what it is that you may disagree with. But more importantly, I want to know why you disagree with some of the things that we may talk about on this particular channel. So try and get involved with me if you can. Thanks, Vic. Sounds good, he says. So, and I just wanted to highlight this particular thing that I put up there to start with. So we'll talk about this if I can bring it up. So this is a comment that I put up to start with, because my wife and I have a podcast, which I'd like to think that some of you could participate in, at least getting to, because we've only run, I think we've had 16 sessions, and haven't had a great audience at this point. Didn't expect to, really. But some of the discussions we have are kind of fun, and it's nice to have that conversation with my wife. So you can just go to the bottom of the comments section and click on the podcast as well. So thanks for doing that, if you can. Love you. Someone says, love your take on Sky. Who's the worst commentator on there? So thanks for that. I think I'll just comment on this one as well. Love your take on Sky News. And this raises an interesting question, really, and that is, so up until last month, I had, and this is just me being honest and transparent with you, up until last month, I had 1,200 subscribers, which was simply just motoring along, a few subscribers every now and again. And then I put out a post, which, well, actually, no, what happened was, in September, around September last year, I put out a post. Well, there was a time anyway when Trump got shot, and I put out this post, and it registered 80,000 views, and suddenly things started to take off, and that was fine, and I had a few subscribers as a result of that. And then last month, with only 1,200 subscribers, my subscribers shot up for reasons I can't explain, don't want to explain. But I appreciate it, because what a lot of people don't understand about the work that I do is that I don't want to be dependent upon my retirement plan. I want to do this stuff because I enjoy it. It's fun. I like the technology and that sort of stuff, and I love having conversations with you, as I've said. But I want to do this so that I can earn some sort of income from it to supplement my retirement, basically. We're not wealthy people by any means, and it's just nice to know that I've got an additional income coming in, which fortunately, thanks to you and the subscribers, which cost you nothing, incidentally, and I do suggest you do subscribe to a channel if you haven't already, because it provides me with an opportunity to do something that's not only constructive, that I enjoy doing, but also which provides slight income for yours truly and my family. So thanks for all of that. So I'll get stuck into and I'm just watching your comments. So the question was, so I'll get back to that question that I had up here before, and see if I can respond to this. Love your take on Sky News. Yeah, that's right. That's why I started to talk about what I was saying, because it's when I started to talk about Sky News and criticising Andrew Bolt and all the other morons on that show on Sky News, that my subscriptions took off. And so I now have a collection, I think, of people who watch my videos who are interested in my take on Sky News. But it's not just Sky News. It's my take on anything that is Murdoch press oriented. So anything that has Murdoch press in it, I have an issue with. In terms of who is the worst person on Sky News, I think it's either Sharry Markson or Andrew Bolt. The others, the guys that do The Outsiders, for example, on a Sunday, are all revolting. Rita Panahi is a disgrace. There's trying to remember the other names now that I've said all of that. They'll come to me in a second. But all those people are terrible in terms of offering a version of the news which is extremely right-wing tiered. Now, you know, one could criticise the ABC or any network for that matter for having a slant that is not that they may not agree with. So we get that on Channel 10. I don't watch much free-to-air apart from the ABC. But I do see snippets from the Sunrise program, and other programs. And I think, well, you know, they do have a slant, right? But the point with Sky News and the Murdoch press is it isn't as obvious. So they may take one particular view on one occasion, take a different view on another. But Sky News takes the same view in every circumstance. This is the after dark people. There's some of the broadcasts they do during the day are reasonable and are newsworthy. I accept that. But the after dark stuff, when most of the viewers, the right-wing people, are watching their programs, when they get home from work, they turn on Sky News, you know, and they wind up with Andrew Bolt and Paul Murray, another one, and Peter Credlin, whom I cannot stand. So, and Peter Credlin will have Tony Abbott on. I think she did a day or so ago. You know, and these people are there to construct a right-wing narrative that is skewed. It's not balanced. They have a specific objective, and the specific objective is to convey a right-wing message, hoping that people will vote according to their right-wing perspective. The interesting thing about all of that for me is that they've failed because they have no longer been able to justify their right-wing motivation. Because prior to the election, as they were running up to the election, they were bombarding the media. They were bombarding, their viewers with everything that was right-wing and how terrible and weak and pathetic Albanese was. And it just went on and on. It was endless. And as a result of that, they have shown to all of us that this propaganda that they purport is unrealistic. It doesn't hit the mark. It didn't work in their favour, and they failed. And as a result of that, I expected them, after the election, to sit back and say, okay, we've got to stop doing some of this stuff. Maybe we need to find a different perspective. We can still be right-wing, present our views accordingly, but we didn't need to do the attacks that we had in the past because they simply didn't work. Now, we waited a week or so, and what happened was that they started to attack Susan Lee. They started to attack the election result, started to look at why it is that the Liberal Party and the National Party lost. and they were brutal with Susan Lee, in fact, incredibly brutal. And I couldn't understand why until I started to realise that their brutality was short-lived, that it was simply so they have these factions, obviously, within the Liberal Party. They have the right faction, they have the moderates, and they have all these other factions. And to some extent, Peter Credlin, Tony Abbott, and that crew and Sherry Markson in particular, were determining or expressing the views around a woman being elected to that position, that she has decided not to take the extreme right view, that she's decided that nuclear, for example, is something that they're going to dispense with, maybe, that she was going to take more of a moderate and centrist view. And as a result of that, when Susan Lee decided to do that, they saw this as an affront to them. So they therefore decided that they would attack her, diminish her as best as they could. And even though I could not understand from the world of me as to why Angus Taylor was even considered as a possibility amongst all of this. What did Angus Taylor have to offer, given he was a terrible performer in Parliament, and that he was an economic disaster when it came to confronting the Treasurer Chalmers? So they chose Susan Lee, who also was a terrible performer, I hasten to add, because basically when you look at their front bench, they have never demonstrated, while in opposition, any degree of reasonableness. And they certainly didn't demonstrate any degree of courage. They fought for things that they knew or must have known at some level through their research or whatever, but they must have known that they were going to fail. But they still kept at it anyway. And they canned everything that the Labor Party put up. If during the last 3 years they had decided that they were going to not confront everything and say no to everything, that they would support certain aspects of the Labor Party agenda, they would have been in a far better position to have won this election. But they chose not to do that. And as a result, they lost. So that's my take on all of that. And there's stacks of messages here. I don't know how I can get through all of these guys. They do what thanks, MKK. They do what Murdoch tells them to do. Going further right isn't the answer for the Libs. So thanks for that. And I think that's true too. That the further the right they go, the more damaging it's going to be for the Liberal Party. I mean, that was simply obvious from the last election that this was the case, but they did, and as a result of that, they have suffered the consequences of doing that. And for those of us that are more progressive, if you like, it's a good thing to see them going that far. But it's bad for politics, and I keep making this point over and over again. So excuse me for doing so, but the Labor Party need a really competent opposition. And, whether that now has become, the Greens are even further diminished, so is it coming from them? No, the Tills are still in some sort of shape, even though they've lost a seat or two. But they need a good opposition, and it's certainly not going to come from One Nation or Babbitt or any of these other characters. So we need to they need to be able to be, the Labor Party needs to be challenged. It's as simple as that. Are the Liberal Party and the Nationals capable of doing that? I don't think, given the quality of the members of their party at the moment, that they are. That the Liberal Party, and particularly the commentary on Sky News, are so upset about what's happening in relation to the people like Humes and others who missed out on the shadow ministry, that they've decided that it's a waste of time and a waste of space. So the Liberal Party, in a sense, I think, have given up. But the right-wing media have not. So I want to move on to, and I thank for everybody that's been online. I really do appreciate it. It's great to see that you're there. So someone's got a comment. So Hamas can start the war, and when all right. So this is Sheldon. So this looks like it's a challenging response. So Tony. So Hamas can start the war, and when they start to lose the war, they can demand Israel stop the war so they can... I'm trying to read what you're saying here, mate. So when they stop the war, they can start to forever real. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So perhaps you could explain that further to me, Sheldon, what you actually mean by that. I'm about to do, so that's a good segue into this thing I'm about to do in relation to Netanyahu. So we'll just have a look at this, and then I'll get back to the comment after I've finished with this particular bit of news. So Netanyahu vows to take control of Gaza as UK, France and Canada threaten action against Israel. Now, one of my key issues around the Gaza situation has been, and it's quite simple for me, it's the number of people, of women and children who have nothing to do with Hamas, but who have died. And I keep saying this, and I don't know why I have to keep saying this. I've heard other commentators more significant than I make this particular issue. But why is it? Explain to me, why is it that all of us must try and justify what is happening in Gaza in terms of the horror that occurred on October the 7th, 2023, and the IDF's response? Why isn't it that we just can't accept that both of those events, that the Hamas response is terrible, that Hamas is a terrorist organisation? I agree with that. It is. Why can't we accept also that what the IDF, or how the IDF has responded, has been inhumane? Why can't we accept that there are people on both sides of that spectrum who want to see the other side completely wiped out? That is true. Let's accept that, but let's try and find a way to move on beyond it. Because on the other hand, we can't accept that so many people are being killed indiscriminately, that for whatever reason, bombing hospitals and schools is a good strategy, that we haven't heard all that much from, and this is a response to Sheldon, your question here, I guess. So just read it. It says, okay, I'll try and read it. I'm having trouble because the screen I've got here isn't as large as I would have liked. Hamas can start the war, and when they start to lose the war, they can demand Israel stop the war so they can learn, rearm, and keep the war going forever. Get real. Okay, I've now read it. What does all of that mean? I'll bring it back up again so all of you can see it. I don't know whether that's true, actually. You might think that it is, that this is the goal. I would not like to see... So what are the solutions then? The solution may be to find a way to negotiate to get rid of Hamas entirely. Now, to do that, does that mean that we need to kill 50,000 people? Is there another way of doing that so that women and children are not murdered? You know, there are stories now where people are going to collect their food because they're starving and being shot by the IDF. Do you, Sheldon, see that as okay? That's my question to you. Do you think that, forget about what may happen in the future, because obviously, Sheldon, you don't have an answer to this. Clearly you don't know what's going to happen. No one does. But there must be another alternative for this war to end. Is it about taking over and destroying all the Palestinian people? Or is it about trying to find ways to negotiate at this point with Hamas to release the hostages that they have and to find ways to take an end to this war? And it may be that Hamas might have to stay in power to some extent. Or it may be that the United Nations steps in and they organise some sort of reasonable election within Gaza. But I don't know how you can do that when the place is completely destroyed and turned into rubble. You know, the IDF have made this much, much worse, not only just the killing of people, but the destruction that they've caused. So to be able to get a settlement that is perhaps a two-state solution, which is something that Israel do not want, but the world is now asking for, is primarily an issue of concern. But goes on to say this article that I raised earlier is Key allies call escalation egregious and promise concrete response if Israel does not end renewed offences and allow aid into the Strip. So this is just about aid. This is just about simply saying, well, we want these people not to starve to death. We want children to survive. And some of the photos that I've seen of children suffering from malnutrition is horrible. It's horrible. How can anybody in their right mind even justify any of that? So, as one person says here, just stop killing civilians. I agree. It's that simple. At the end of this war, we're going to find that there's going to be Netanyahu and a whole host of his soldiers are going to be tried for committing war crimes. That is what's going to happen. So Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that Israel will take control of all of Gaza as three key allies attacked his egregious escalation of the military campaign and blockage on humanitarian aid. Britain, France and Canada attacked Israel's expansion of its war as disproportionate, described conditions in Gaza as intolerable and threatened a concrete response if Israel's campaign continues. So, and my biggest disappointment here is that Australia hasn't taken an appropriate response to this either. It isn't until recently that Australia has decided that it should respond. So, and this is the Australian response. Albanese says Israel excuses for withholding Gaza aid are not credible. Now, my question around all of this is, if this is about just the aid, why are you not objecting to all the deaths at this point? Where in the hell have you been? There's a lot of consternation and distress on October the 7th, 2023. And all of us, I think, that saw that and experienced that felt the same. And the world stood back and said, well, let's see what the Israelis are going to do. Let's just see how involved they may get. And as a result of that, we've allowed the escalation and the devastation to continue. It isn't until now when we've not only seen the devastation and the thousands of innocent people that have died, we're now seeing the starvation of those people and the refusal from the IDF of letting humanitarian aid in. And most countries have now had enough. So we've had this thing through AWA, we've had this whole propaganda from the IDF about the World Health Organization and the United Nations providing funds for terrorists. And we now have this other issue that has occurred, which is that Hamas are now taking all the aid and everything that's coming through and storing that or whatever. And, but we don't know for sure. All we know for sure is that if the aid doesn't get through, people die. That's what we know. So get the aid through. But the IDF don't want that because they don't care about the Palestinians' lives. That is what matters here. They don't care about them one iota. In some of the strongest criticism to date, and there should have been stronger criticism along the way, but this point, in some of the strongest criticism to date, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says Israel's excuses and explanations for blocking the aid to Gaza are untenable, and it is an outrage that a democratic state would withhold aid. And why are we imposing this right now? So Sheldon says, stop blaming Israel off. I tell you what, buddy, whoever Sheldon is, I'll just come back to this. So, Sheldon, who should we blame? Hamas started this, perhaps. Also, let's not forget that, and I'll go off on a slight tangent here, seems to be taking a long time to have this discussion, but this is why we're here. The West Bank has been a disaster and has been Israel's effort to dominate and to harm Palestinians. The whole Israel thing has been offensive. Now, I'm the first to agree that Israel needed to have a place of their own. The Jews, pardon me, needed to have a place of their own, particularly after the Holocaust, and they needed to find a sense of belonging, I guess, and the state of Israel is that place. I'm not disputing any of that. I don't understand the history completely, but I certainly understand enough of it to know that the Jewish people need a place of their own. What we need to understand also is that there's a group, an important group of Jewish people who disagree themselves with what the IDF are doing. There's a group of people who are Jewish who see this as an atrocity. I saw a video from Bernie Sanders the other day that said, "I am Jewish." And I'm horrified by what the Israeli government is doing. So you don't have to be a non-Jew, you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be a Jewish person, you don't have to be any of those groups in order to say that what the IDF is doing is wrong. Because it is. It's as simple as that. So stop blaming Israel. I'm blaming Israel. At this point, I blame Hamas for doing what they did on October the 7th. No disputing that. I'm blaming Hamas for being a terrorist group and for making the statements that they've made about, from the river to the sea and all the other sort of stuff, even though that's open to interpretation, I hasten to add. I understand all of that, right? But I'm not talking about that now. So, Sheldon, I'm not saying that Israel is that Israel is totally responsible. They're not, because of what happened on October 7th. What I am saying is that they're responsible for what happened since. They are responsible for what has happened since. And that is what is in question. So the United Kingdom and France and other Western allies have threatened to impose sanctions on Israel over Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to allow minimum humanitarian aid into the Palestinian territory. Australia has not signed up to that joint threat, but did join international criticism of Israel's proposed aid model and has called for a full and immediate resumption of humanitarian supplies into Gaza. The United Nations has warned Gaza is on the brink of famine. Now, tell me if you think that is an appropriate response by any government, that they're going to starve people out. That is against all United Nations conventions. It is wrong because it's killing innocent people who are not involved in this war. And we must remember that there are a number of people that are in Gaza, Palestinians, who don't necessarily support Hamas either. So there needs to be a resolution to this particular issue, and I do thank everybody for... So I'm just going to finish off with one more of Sheldon's response. Ask yourself this question: if Hamas pull out of their weapons, they put their weapons down, I guess you're saying, would the war stop? Yes. If Israel put their weapons down, would happen? The answer, would be destroyed. They would be destroyed. So I guess what Sheldon's saying here is that if Hamas put their weapons down, and I'm assuming this is what you're saying, that if Hamas put their weapons down, would the war stop? I would expect so. And so what would happen if So you're saying that if the Israelis put their weapons down, then it wouldn't stop. They'd be overtaken by Hamas. No, they wouldn't. We negotiate peace. And it's a question as to what sort of peace that they want and who is prepared to be able to give up ground in order to have that peace. Maybe just it's not about putting your weapons down, it's about just seeking a ceasefire and having conversations about what should happen after that. And it's about getting the international community together to decide, in fact, that the best solution to this is a two-state solution. However that looks, who knows? I certainly don't. So, moving on. Right, so there is an article about just continuing this Gaza theme, I guess. What statements, witnesses and video tell us about Sunday's fire incident near aid centres in Gaza? And this is the incident that I referred to earlier. In the early morning of June the 1st, a large number of Palestinians were killed with claims it happened as they were trying to approach a new aid distribution centre near the southern Gazan city of Rafah. The International Committee of the Red Cross said its field hospital received 179 cases. It amazes me that there are still hospitals in this place because so many of them have been bombed. And if you're in a hospital, you've kind of got to be targeted, I reckon. So many of them appeared with gunshot and shrapnel wounds. 21 declared dead on arrival. Now, were these people Hamas people? We haven't really got any figures on how many Hamas soldiers have been killed. I think someone did say, I did hear someone say that about 20,000 or so. But, many more civilians have been killed. And we don't know whether that figure is correct or not either. The Mass-run Gaza Health Ministry said 31 people were killed and accused Israel of turning aid centres into death traps. Israel's military rejected claims it was responsible, calling the allegations false reports. The organisation which runs the aid site, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, said its activities on Sunday passed without incident, dismissing false reporting about deaths, mass injuries and chaos. UN Chief Antonio Guterres is now calling for an immediate and independent investigation. Israel does not let international news organisations in. Well, I wonder why they don't do that. Why don't they let international news organisations into Gaza? What's the problem? Making confirmation exactly what happened more difficult. The ABC News Verify has announced statements, security of footage, satellite image and videos from the ground to try and paint a clear picture. And clearly the IDF were focusing on destroying as many people as they could. I'm about to change. So thanks to everybody that's been online. It's good to see so many comments. It's hard for me to keep up with them all. God's omni useless. Of course not. Jews are warmongers. I don't know whether Jews are warmongers. I don't think that's true at all. How many children have been killed in any time soon? I agree. I don't think we are going to find out how many kids have been killed. There will be obviously some sort of reports made, I guess, after all of this, and we'll find out then exactly the degree to which the hostilities have killed so many people. What was that one? Why are they in Australia when they have their own homeland? Who in the hell are you talking about? If they're media, then they would prove that. I don't know what MKK you're necessarily talking about there. So I dispute the fact that Jews had a special place where other religions don't, and they're not safe in Australia or the US. All right, so you're saying, so this is this one. So this person's saying, I dispute the fact that Jews need a special place where other religions don't. Are they not safe in Australia or the US? Well, we're talking back to the 1948, and we're also, I think they need to see this in historical context, is that they were somewhat brutalised during the Nazi regime in Germany and Poland and elsewhere, and felt like they needed a safe place to be, I guess. And the British got together and they thought, well, we've got this vacant piece of dirt, let's give this to the Jewish group of people, and as a result, Israel was formed. So you need to understand it in the context in which it was meant to be delivered. So, and there have been other religious groups that have been persecuted as well. I understand that, but I don't know of any that's been persecuted to the same extent that the Jewish community has been. So I'm going to move on a little bit, and I'm just going to change tactics. So this probably won't be as much interest to many of you, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because it's a subject which I think is important, and it's important to me. So this particular bit of information is about... So I for years had worked with, as I said earlier, a number of people, a number of kids in particular, who were caught up in the criminal justice system. And my take on the criminal justice system has always been that we need to do more mentoring for young people. Incarcerating them doesn't help. I've visited the local youth correction centre here at Cavan on a number of occasions. I know what those kids go through. I know the types of families that they come from. And we need to find different ways of working through the issues in relation to youth crime. The problem that we have is that if we're going to work to incarcerate young people, we are just making it worse. Someone once said to me that the best university that a young person could go to is the youth justice system, because then they graduate to an adult prison where they really do learn how to behave badly and how to commit crimes, more involved crimes than just stealing cars. So, we've got to break the cycle somehow. But the Liberal Party in Queensland has decided that it's not true because they're not very wise, but certainly they have decided that youth crime is an issue. And most of us, most of the community, not me, but most of the community think that if there's issues around crime, governments can solve it because they can wave a magic wand. And waving that magic wand is really about locking people up. This is what they tend to think. So the Liberal Party, they've got this youth crime legislation, and this youth crime, rightfully so, has been condemned by the United Nations as incompatible with basic child rights, right? So let's just see what they say. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture has urged Queensland's Parliament to vote down the government's headline youth crime legislation, calling it incompatible with basic child rights. The Liberal National Government ran on a slogan of adult crime, adult time, a terrible slogan, incidentally, because adults, one would expect, not always, would have the capacity to understand what a crime was and what the consequences were of committing those crimes. Young people don't normally have that cognitive ability. And in fact, for young males, often that cognitive ability isn't established until they're around 25. So they don't have it. So it's the two things don't match up. The two things are not the same. The Liberal National Government ran a slogan that said it passed legislation to sentence children convicted of 13 offences the same as adults in December. Parliament will consider a second round of legislation adding an additional 20 offences this week, so just making it friggin' worse. In an open letter to Australian authorities, Alice Jewell Edwards, the Special Rapporteur on Torture, and Albert K. Barone, a Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous People, said Australia's criminal justice system appears to be in crisis nationwide. And they go on to say, children are suffering undue harm to their safety and well-being, as well as to their educational and life prospects as a result of short-sighted approaches to youth criminality and detention. Goes on to say, the bill would have an especially negative impact on the lives of Indigenous children, and this is so true, and that, I just don't know to what degree the Queensland government took this into account. Probably not at all, because they probably don't care about Indigenous children, who are already disproportionately represented in the criminal legal system. We urge members of the Queensland Parliament to vote against the bill, they said. So Edwards, who's a human rights lawyer, is the first Australian in the role. In April, Queensland's Premier David Crisafulli criticised the UN for interfering in local politics, saying this place will govern its own laws. Okay, this place will determine how we keep Queenslanders safe, and this place will account. So, the objective of these laws would be simply to lock up all children that commit a series of offences, whatever these offences are. So there was 13 to start with, and they added 20 more on. So, and I don't know what they are necessarily. I haven't got them here, but this is not the solution. This is a social problem that needs social solutions. It needs people to work together in order to find out who these kids that are at risk and to develop programs that help them and their families to be safe. It is actually, believe it or not, that simple. But it is difficult for governments to be able to implement some of these programs because they will argue they don't have the funding. They could create the funding. Locking up kids costs money. Locking up them as adults costs hundreds of thousands of dollars per individual. So we should be working not to lock people up, and whatever money would be saved from that, we should put into social programs that are likely to benefit the kids and the families. That is what needs to be done. They never do that. They always look for what I see as the cheap solutions to all of this. Now, I want to finish on two things. I want to finish on Trump. Trump tests his political clout. Musk tests his... So the title of this particular article is Musk tests his political clout, now he's no longer Trump's first buddy. So there was this fabulous scene of Trump, of Musk in Trump's office receiving a key, which Trump states that he gives to everybody, so it wasn't anything special. It's a key to the White House. It's a symbolic key. It doesn't open anything and will certainly never open Trump's heart because he doesn't have one. But so he gets this key. And at this particular point, you could see Musk is not too happy about this sort of blasé endorsement of him. He kind of doesn't believe it, I think. And no, neither he should, because on the way out, Musk has a go at Trump and his beautiful, wonderful policy that he was, legislation that he was putting forward to government. So it says here in the article, Elon Musk has been out of the White House for less than 100 hours when he unleashed a tirade against US President Donald Trump's signature piece of legislation and top domestic priority. Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill was not just bad. In Musk's view, it was a massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill and disgusting abomination. It would increase the already gigantic budget deficit of $2.5 trillion to $3.9 million. Amazing numbers of figures. And burden America citizens with crushingly unsustainable debt. And that's true. While we need to admit, though, that while Musk was there, Musk benefited greatly from this Doge thing because there were no cuts to any of the programs that Musk is involved in, not just the EVs. In fact, there was legislation to get rid of some of the energy requirements or the allowances or tax relief that were offered if you buy an EV, which was instigated under Biden. So they were being taken off, so I guess he wasn't too happy with that. And his SpaceX stuff, he has lots of contracts, and then he had Starlink, and then there were contracts suggested around Starlink. So all these things that Musk was making money from, he benefited from all of that. But at some point, he'd had enough. So there were reports that he and Pete Hegseth almost got into a punch-up at one point. And, I love the story of Musk turning up there on this occasion to receive this golden key, and he had he obviously been injured, and he blamed his 6-year-old son for it. who he suggested he told him to punch him in the face. I guess his 6-year-old son X was doing what most of us wanted to do, was to give him a right royal punch in the face. I think that was without doubt. So that is what happened. And so so Musk now has decided that Trump is not his best mate. Those members of the House of Representatives who voted for the bill knew they were wrong, Musk said. Not content to leave it there, he added, in November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people. So this is Musk's theme. So if you disagree with Musk, who believes he's running the country, well, until he left the White House on that particular day, but Musk believes that he has control over all of this stuff, even though his arrangement, his 130-day arrangement has concluded. He's out the door. And also, Musk needs to face the fact that while he's been there, his pride and joy, which is Tesla, has decreased by some 40% in stock. So his absence has, and his the bad publicity that's come about in relation to Tesla has meant that the stockholders, the shareholders, the chief executive and all the other people on the board have suffered as a result of his crazy behaviour. And so he realises that he personally is going to lose a lot of money, even though it doesn't matter how much money he loses, he'd still be very wealthy. But he's obviously felt the heat in terms of being a part of this Trump administration. So his parting statement was, I am going to get you by telling you that you are gone. Now, I've got two things I want to finish with, and one of them is about tariffs in Australia, and the other is about your comments on my YouTube channel. Not necessarily those that I've got here, because some of you are having a conversation with Sheldon. Please do, feel free. This is what it's about. It's a community, so let's have this conversation. I'm more than happy to see that happening, that's for sure. So on this particular item, Australia spared Trump tariff letter as Lee says Albanese should secure a special deal. Now, I'm fascinated by this because this is... do you want to make that bigger? This is because Susan Lee is encouraging Anthony Albanese, or supporting Anthony Albanese in dealing with the tariffs. And there's an interesting contrast here between what Peter Dutton did or said of Albanese when the tariffs were first imposed. Because Dutton believed that Albanese had this magic wand, that he could just wave this magic wand, and he had this special relationship that we have with Australia because that Trump has with Australia because we run a surplus with them. So it goes to say, Australia has been spared a letter from the Trump administration demanding countries cut trade barriers to US goods as the White House prepares to reinstate its Liberation Day tariffs, but has not secured a UK-style exemption to increase steel and aluminium import taxes. Opposition leader, in steps Susan Lee, with her profound and incredibly wise statements. Opposition leader Susan Lee pushed Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to get the same reduced tariffs for Australian metal exports to the US that Britain Prime Minister Keir Starmer won for the UK, saying the opposition would work with the government to make it happen. Very thoughtful of them, because in the previous incarnation or iteration of the Liberal Party, they were not prepared to work with the government at all about absolutely anything. So now they are. This is a change. Welcome change. So President Donald Trump's tariffs on our steelmakers are not in the spirit of our century-old partnership, and we urge the Americans to give Australia a fair go and remove them, Lee said. The Trade Minister Dan Farrell met his UK counterpart Jameson Greer in Paris overnight as Albanese prepares to hold his first meeting with Trump later this month. I actually think that, if you're going to meet with Trump, don't meet him in the White House because he will whitewash you. But I'd love to see a politician punch Trump in the face. Look, I don't generally advocate violence, but Trump does need, a politician from a renowned democracy, whether it be little old Australia, to tell him to bugger off. That is not that important to us, and if you don't like us, we will trade elsewhere, and we will trade in let's Europe, China. China and Europe, we trade more together with them than we do with the US. So, China, Europe, and Asia, and just forget about the United States altogether, is really, I think, is the way to go. There's this meeting between Don Farrell and Jamie Greer, and this is supposed to dominate this meeting. So Albanese should definitely choose not to get involved in any of that. So I've got okay. So I'm just going to finish with some interesting comments that I've received on my channel, and I just want to thank all those people that have contributed to this, and those of you that have contributed today. Actually, there's been quite a number of people that have joined the conversation, and I really do appreciate it. And can I just say, before we finish off on any of this, that it would be really nice if you subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications. Let me know what you think about these live feeds, whether you think it's something you can get engaged in, as a lot of people seem to have, and have this conversation. This is about, to me, it always has been about building a community, and for me to have an opportunity to have a conversation with you. So I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for it. So try and keep it happening if you can. So I just want to read out a couple of responses on my comment section. Trump is trashing Australian sovereignty. How dare he tell our government what to do? USA needs to butt out of our country's economy. The country needs to stop licking the USA boots. I couldn't agree more. And this is my whole stitch has been, let's find ways to separate ourselves. Let's just cut the umbilical cord. Let's cut the apron. Let's separate ourselves from the need to have the United States looking after everything that we do, and forever. And let's decide that at the end of the day, the United States should not play a part in our politics or anything like it. I no longer want to be part of America's proxy war, forcing us to buy their weapons, boom, creating conflicts with our neighbours, in order to make America wealthy to our children's expense, that they will be wasting on paying taxes for the next 150 years for something they have no interest in using. Also, Commonwealth Bank partners up with AUKUS. However, we as Australians cannot even get a mortgage to buy a house. And there's some element of truth in that, I think, is that, we're spending billions of dollars on these boats that sink, when in actual fact, they're right. That money could be spent on improving what's happening in Australia, improving our lifestyle, and certainly providing houses. The USA is in the weapons selling business. Of course, they want countries to spend more on their military, and that's so true. That's so true. And there's this one in relation to, look, I actually have to apologise here. I put in the thumbnail, I had the client, I meant the climate, and so I do apologise. I had a dementia moment, I think. These Sky News asses and their grubby clown show playbook must be seen to be reviled, while we laugh and cringe about Sky News. And Defence Australia, that one, I have a choice in who I deal with. One guy buys my stuff and gives me heaps of cash, some of which I spend with him. Nice family guy, educated, hardworking, and has a reputation of not getting into fights or pushing his ideas on others. The other choice is a bully who rips me off with junk I only get because he has doctored the store to only keep it by providing high incentives to the purchasing importer. Then if he gets his ass handed to him, he expects me to get into the fight he started. He's also a thief and a con man. Can someone give me advice on who I should deal with, please? I love that. And I love, there's so many great, I love this one. It just simply says, I like Chinese food. So do I. Love Chinese food. I think, Gaza one, to literally watch the slaughter in Gaza almost every day and see the Zionist Hezbollah on social media is deeply distressing for me. It's surely one of the great moral tests of humanity, considering it cannot be denied. Watching that parasite, Kenny, Chris Kenny, true. Okay, you said it, not me. Prattle on, its stomach churning to me. It really shows how toxic the Murdoch media is. Individuals have been excluded for less than what that bastard puts out across the media stables. Now, because I've been going for over an hour, I want to thank you all for participating. And again, I'll say, please subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me. So I appreciate all of that. And I will be endeavouring every week to do a live feed so I can have chats like this with you more often. So in the meantime, I just need to say, take care, look after yourselves, keep the comments going. I love reading them, and make sure that you're caring for yourself and the people that you love.